Chief Denny, if you'd please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have the roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Ball.
Here.
Councilmember Stimmel.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Present.
Councilmember Valenzuela.
Here.
Councilmember Cerveny.
Here.
Mayor Thornton.
Here. Thank you. Well, again, good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a special occasion. We're going to be honoring 3 of our police officers. So a little bit chaotic here tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to immediately have the presentation and the ceremony, and then after that we'll adjourn the meeting for about 10 minutes, give the officers and their families a little bit of time to take pictures, whatever they choose to do, and then we'll re-adjourn the meeting and get on with the regular city council meeting. So with that, I just have a brief little message here that I'd like to read, and then I'm going to turn it over to the chief. So, as the mayor of the city of La Center, I would like to take this opportunity to commend Sergeant Robert Scott, Officer Andrew Marvitz, and Officer Glenn Pelfko for their exceptional service to the citizens of La Center. Your professionalism in an emergency situation displayed your dedication to serve the public as a law enforcement officer. Your actions set an admirable standard for all to follow. You are a credit to yourself, the La Center Police Department, and the City of La Center. Your dedication to duty and diligence has not gone unnoticed. The city would like to show our true appreciation to you as the La Center police officer and take the time to acknowledge your commitment to the residents you serve. At this time, Chief Denny will lead the ceremony to present each of you with the life-saving award from the National Awards Program of the American Police Hall of Fame for your recent acts of valor. Chief Denny.
Mayor, council, citizens, and guests, as Chief of Police for the City of La Center, it's with great honor to be part of tonight's ceremony, as this is a historical event for the City of La Center and the La Center Police Department. We have not done enough to recognize our employees who deserve recognition for praise for their work, performance, and or achievements and their years of service for the city. I pledge to continue to have recognition programs in place within the police department that we will allow employees to be recognized from their peers to their individuals and team achievements. Tonight, because of the life-saving measures taken by 3 of your La Center police officers, it is my pleasure to be able to recognize each one of them for their selfless devotion to the profession of law enforcement. First and foremost, I want to recognize all of my employees for their exemplary work performed and acknowledge each one of them for their contributions, commitments, and adherence to our mission and serving this community every day. Our department's over here, obviously, so I'm going to start with Alice Peters. Alice. Danny Bowerman. Sergeant Chris Olson. Officer Martinez. Alex Martinez. He's in the back. Officer Andy Marvitz. Officer Greg McDonald. Officer Glenn Pavelko. Sergeant Robert Scott. And Officer Roger Sabe. Last year, the council and mayor made a firm commitment to show that public safety for the citizens of La Center is foremost in their minds by allowing the police department to promote within for a second sergeant position and underfilling that vacancy made by that internal promotion. Also, the council has reaffirmed their commitment to budgeting to hire another officer for 2018. Sergeant Robert Scott was the first promotion to undergo a supervisor field training program. I want to commend Sergeant Scott for accepting that challenge and excelling and completing his probationary status with high marks. I'd also like to commend our newest of our new hires, Alex Martinez, for doing an exemplary job as he's become a valued asset to the La Center Police Department team. Now for tonight's awards, I want to give special recognition to Sergeant Chris Olson and Sergeant Scott for their leadership in nominating the officers who will be recognized tonight. They were recognized in the American Police Hall of Fame. The American Police Hall of Fame and Museum developed this national awards program in 1972 to recognize the acts of valor of law enforcement officers throughout the United States. The awards committee knows that far too often an officer's actions are overlooked due to the lack of local awards programs. The National Award Program is open to all departments across the country. I would like to ask, well, they were going to come up and read their recognition, but I'm going to do that for them. So I'm going to read the recognition letters that were done in behalf of the officers. Sergeant Olson recommended Sergeant Scott and Officer Pavelko for a brave act of valor on December 29, 2016, at about 1800 hours. Officer Robert Scott and Officer Glenn Pavelko responded to a location to a report of a suicide in progress. Dispatch was attempting to advise them that a female in the residence was attempting to end her life through carbon monoxide poisoning. They entered the house, and by having to, go into the house anyway, I'm not going reading this verbatim anymore. Let me read it. They were advised that they attempting to end her life in her residence. The report party healthcare provider called the report that it was an attempt to end her life by carbon monoxide exposure from running a vehicle within a closed garage. Officer Scott and Officer Pavelko arrived on scene and could hear the vehicle running in the garage. Officer Pavelko was able to make entry into the residence through an open front door, and the two officers made their way to the garage, which was filled with high concentration of exhaust fumes. Once inside the garage, they found semi-conscious and sitting behind the wheel of a running vehicle, the person being exposed. The officer opened the garage and removed from the vehicle, and the fresh air where medical personnel was immediately began to treat her. So for that reason, they were recognized by Sergeant Olson for their willingness to act in the interest of life preservation. It's difficult to best away decisions such as these and make split-second choices that not only reflect on our own moral and ethical convictions, but take into account local, state, and federal law, as well as department policy. Officer Scott and Officer Pavelko were placed in this position. They used their sound judgment and acted quickly and saved a person's life. So, and then the second incident occurred on September 27, 2017. And this one was a recognition by Sergeant Scott for Officer Andrew Marvitz. Officer Marvitz was at the La Center High School campus handling a call for service. At this time, he was dispatched to a medical assist call in the same parking lot. Dispatch advised him that a medical was responding to a female student who had collapsed in the parking lot, and that a school nurse and off-duty firefighter were also on scene. Officer Marvitz immediately crossed the parking lot and found the nurse performing CPR on the student. As he arrived, he noticed that the female student was unconscious. He also watched the female stop breathing and go from pale to blue in color. He assisted the nurse and the off-duty fire chief with continued CPR. After approximately 4 to 5 minutes, the CPR to that student who began breathing and gasping for air. However, she still remained unconscious. Medical personnel arrived shortly after they continued to render aid. The automated external defibrillator, AED, machine indicated that the patient had a pulse, so CPR was ceased at that time. The efforts exhibited by all three individuals were successful at regaining signs of life and allowed the arriving medical personnel to maintain life support efforts as they transported the patient to the hospital, where she eventually recovered. Officer Marvitz, along with the other two individuals on scene, exhibited the highest level of professionalism and care during this incident. They should be proud of their efforts. Officer Marvitz had brought great pride to the La Center Police Department and the City of La Center. Officer Marvitz exhibited teamwork, professionalism, and excellence, which reflects highly on himself and his agency and should be commended. His actions are a direct reflection of the La Center Police Department's stated core values of integrity, teamwork, and excellence. Due to Officer Marvitz's rendering life-saving techniques, which aided in this preservation of human life, he's receiving the National Life Saving Award tonight. So with that, I want to read a letter from the American Police Hall of Fame. These are addressed to Sergeant Scott, Officer Marvitz, and Officer Pavelko. It is my pleasure to inform you that you've been awarded the Life-Saving Award of the National Awards Program of the American Police Hall of Fame. Our staff members join me in commending you for your valor and service. Your professionalism is an emergency situation that displays your dedication to serve the public as a law enforcement officer. Your selfless acts saved a human life, and your actions should be recognized. The diligence and bravery you exhibited sets an admirable standard for all to follow. Again, please accept our congratulations on your nomination and award. The staff of the American Police Hall of Fame wishes you continued success in your role as a law enforcement officer. Sincerely, Chief Jack L. Runchick, National President. Thank you, guys. And we're going to give you awards now. If you want to go
Absolutely. Let me come around. Come around? Yeah. Scott? Thank you very much, and congratulations on your award. Thank you.
You guys need to go over there. Yeah.
Not least, Officer Marvitz. Congratulations.
Can we get all three of them?
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, would you, the three of you please sit there for pictures with photos?
Chief, Mayor, maybe on each side.
It's the lady. Big fan.
Just real quick, I'm gonna make sure I'm getting your name spelled right.
The mayor and the chief on each side.
Digital film.
He's got some information.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, with that, I'd like to take about a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 7:30, and we'll give them an opportunity to take some pictures. And thank you, everyone, for your understanding, and thanks for being here. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Again, thank you, everybody, for your understanding with the presentation this evening. And again, thank you for being here. So the next thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. If there are no requests for any items to be removed, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is council staff reports and announcements. I have just a couple quick announcements for this evening. First of all, just to remind the council that our city council retreat is scheduled for this Saturday, January 27th, at the Public Works Office. It'll be starting at 9 a.m., and Mr. Lloyd Helverson will be facilitating the meeting again this year. And then also, my next Mayor's Town Hall meeting will be Wednesday, February 7th, beginning at 6:30, and again, it will be at the Public Works Office. That's all I have for this evening. Next is the attorney's report. Mr. Cairns, do you have anything?
I don't, but we'll have an executive session at the end.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Next are council member comments. Councilmember Volf,
I don't have anything tonight.
Councilmember Stimmel,
Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Williams,
No, I'm good, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Valenzuela,
Just to report, I did attend the Ridgefield Port District meeting today on behalf of the city. They just gave an update on their goal achievement this year and established a date for another retreat. And we'll be having a retreat this Saturday as well to do some of the same stuff. So,
thank you, and thanks for attending the meetings, Councilmember. Councilmember Servany.
No comments, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is we have a staff report. This evening, one staff report from Finance Director Lettuce.
Mayor Thornton, council members, and citizens. This is going to be a pretty quick staff report. I realize it's short because it just says that we're working on year end. That says a whole lot. We are doing 1099s, W-2s, year-end reconciliation, quarterly reports, everything. So I only put a few things that we're doing year end, but we are very, very busy. It's progressing quite nicely. We've not had any issues. We've already issued up most of our stuff. And again, we just closed the books for January. We're required to keep them open for 20 days in the new fiscal period. So that's why that pushes the bank rec back a bit. So when you're reconciling, you're doing December and through January 20th. So it gets a little bit exciting. So we're doing that. We're right on track. And I did not include the card room revenues as I normally do because I knew Mr. Lewis was going to be covering those in detail. Okay. So are there any questions that I can answer for anyone?
Thank you. Next on the agenda is citizens' public comment. So if anyone would like to address the council, please step up to the podium, and if you give us your name and address, and limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And for anything that's not on the agenda this evening.
Melda Perryman, 824 East Pioneer Loop Center. Mayor, council, and fellow citizens. I stand before you confused and frustrated. I have attended council meetings for years, and over the last year, I have become increasingly frustrated. I have witnessed tens of thousands of dollars spent on some of the mayor's projects with zero return. For example, trying to outsource the management of the sewer plant, hiring a community development director who quit after 3 days, and recently, a very questionable expenditure of over $24,000 in 1 month alone. Now for the third or fourth time, trying to reduce one of our local businesses' taxes. Just the first 3 of these projects alone have cost the city more than I really want to know. I think you all see the gist of my frustration. Mayor Thornton, you probably think I'm picking on you. Well, actually, I am. I do, however, acknowledge you have a very difficult job. I just don't understand the amount of money you have spent on some of your projects. To the new council members, please talk to your constituents. Listen to their opinions. Ask questions. This also applies to you old-timers. When you vote, vote as the citizens want, not your personal opinion, not Mayor Thornton's opinion. Please use some common sense, your personal integrity, and do not let yourself be bullied. I would urge all of the council to vote no on the tax reduction for the card rooms. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council this evening?
Mr. Mayor, councilmen, fellow citizens,
My name is Michael Santoro. I live at 125 West 16th Street. I would like the council to take into consideration a leash law in the city. Currently, everyone in the city that owns a pet has a licensing fee. I have no clue and can't find from my research, I'm sure there is somewhere, what that money is spent on. I myself have been a victim at least twice of animals off leash that have come and I won't say attacked, but have been aggressive towards my animals. I think that the growth of the city is such that it's time to consider it. I understand we don't actually have a way right now to harness, or that animal control even comes to the city. So even to pick up a stray is difficult for the city. But I think it's something that the city needs to consider as we grow and as we go forward with the growth potential of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Susie Terrell, 628 East 18th Street. Council, Mr. Mayor. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, especially since I know this is a very hard job. It's a very thankless job. But I'm very concerned at how you're running our city. What you're doing with the ordinance is just a lead-in, setting things up to get your 50% tax cut that you've been pushing for ever since you took office. You failed twice before, but now with the new counselors, you're
Excuse me,
making
but
another.
that is on the agenda this evening, so if you would withhold
Okay.
those comments until this public comment on that, thank
Stay
you.
there. I just want you, I just want to say that you and others here have said that I'm a part of a small local group of misinformed, uneducated people. And while that may be true of me, it's most certainly not of my friends. I don't presume to speak for them, but we are like-minded and upset with the way that you're pushing for this. I may have only lived here for 3 years, but my friends are long-term residents who are very knowledgeable about the history of this town. We don't just live in one tiny, sheltered neighborhood of newer homes. We live in neighborhoods throughout the city, old and new, large and small. We are many. We are not just a few. We are college educated. We are ex-business owners, medical and teaching professionals, retired mayors, retired council members, and sheriffs. We are involved and we talk. We are the Lions Club, the book clubs, police advisory, our days, Meals on Wheels, the American Legion, the museum, Friends of the Library, the VA, genealogy clubs, and high school sports. We go to local merchants like Claudia's Beauty Salon. It's all about you. Top Dog Grooming and the Trellis. We support our whole city. While you, Mr. Mayor, have only focused on one thing, the last frontier. The Palace is doing okay, I've been told. 4th Street Bar and Grill is doing well. Even La Casa Tapatia seems busier. But I've been told that you are seldom seen by or ever worry about them. You say you're concerned over our town's welfare, but in the last year you've wasted over $100,000 in numerous debacles of our hard-earned money. And in my humble opinion, you are the one working against the best interests of this town, not the few vocal, misinformed citizens, as we've been called. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else like to address the council this evening? Okay, with that, we'll move on to ordinance resolutions and public hearings. We have a few items tonight on the agenda. The first one being Resolution 18-430, adopting the revised EMS District Number 2 Interlocal Cooperation Agreement, Amendment Number 1, January 2018. We have two representatives from Clark County this evening, Marlia Jenkins and Taylor Helvig, that will be presenting.
Hello, I'm Marlia Jenkins, I'm from Clark County. Taylor and I decided to split our duties. He's going to go to Ridgefield tomorrow night. Just a brief recap. This city is a member of the Emergency Services District Number 2 that provides ambulance services via a contract with the city of Vancouver to your community. This particular interlocal agreement, what we're doing here are some administrative changes. We're proposing that we extend the term of office for the city representative to the EMS board. Annually, the cities get together and decide on one representative to the board. So we're talking about proposing an extension to 2 years instead of 1 year. And I believe that is on page 11 of your interlocal agreement. And then on page 12 is where you see the expansion for 2 years term of office. We're also proposing, you can see on page 11, this amendment here would allow the district to expend monies that it currently has in its account. It has about $70,000 that was left over from a previous administrative arrangement, so that's all the money that's there. And they're also changing a Scrivener's error, and that is back on page 15 of the agreement, just correcting an error in the duration of the agreement. So it would be expiring on December 31st, 2019, not 2020. So those are the proposed amendments that are before you at this time. And we think it will improve the administration and the efficiency of the agreement. Yes, sir.
Couple of comments. Our area out here in North County is growing at a very, very rapid rate. And in reference to the low density and high density assessment or words in the contract, we'd certainly like to have you take a look at maybe redefining that, because our response times out here are getting longer and longer, and that needs to be addressed. This agreement's going to impact that again. It may be the time to ask, I think it's AMR, isn't it, to increase their personnel or something, so that, because they're getting extended more and more downtown, and that's extending our time responses out here. So if you guys are the administrators of this program, then I think those considerations ought to be part of your understanding of what's going on, because we are really growing out here.
And I don't want to confuse the issue here, but very soon EMS District 2 Board is going to start a discussion about extension of the contract with AMR for another five years. That will be a separate action from this one, but it's right around the corner. So if you do have concerns about that, I really recommend that you talk to the 2 county councilors that are members of this board. And currently, the mayor of Ridgefield is your city representative. So be sure that he knows your concerns too. That's the best way to get into that process. And don't delay, because we're going to be kicking that off the middle of February.
All right.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? Very good. Thank you again. Any discussion, council? Or could I get a motion?
I move that we adopt Resolution 18-430 with EMS District Number 2, interlocal amendment number 1, January 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt Resolution 18-430. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. It's for ordinance 2018-02 for gambling tax rates. And Mr. Paul Lewis will be presenting this evening to council.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Lewis Center citizens. Pull up the presentation here. Can I get that?
Click and drag it, or down, yeah.
There. Thank you very much. Item 8B on your agenda is an amendment to the Center Municipal Code Section 5.25, referencing the city's gambling tax. I'm going to go through a presentation on this item, but also on a related item, which is 11A on your agenda as well. It's an agreement with the two principal payers of the gambling tax, the card room tax. This is the same topic that we covered at a workshop last Tuesday with the council. We had a little more, over an hour workshop, essentially covering the same things. I'll highlight any changes as we go along. First up, just want to provide some background information. Council has considered a temporary reduction in the gambling tax rate from 10% to 5% during the 2017 budget process and in the fall of 2017, but took no action. In the fall, the card room owners requested that the city join them in a discussion about an alternative sliding scale tax structure for 2018, and over the last couple of months, the mayor and the card room owners have been meeting regarding the potential change and the changes that were presented to you last week, as well as in this ordinance tonight, reflect those potential changes. And again, as I mentioned, the workshop was last Tuesday where we reviewed this in more depth. Just to give you a little bit of a history on the card room tax revenue and its importance to the Lewis Center community, this graph shows you the amount of revenue and then the percentage of the total general fund tax revenue that's represented by the card room gambling tax. This is going back to 2008. So the blue bar on the left-hand axis is the annual tax revenue. The red line and the right-hand axis is the percentage of that revenue represents of your total general fund revenue. You can see going back, 2011 was really the peak year, $3.2 million in 2011. And over the early 2008 to 2013, you can see the revenue represented between 75 and 80% of the total general fund revenue for the city of Lewis Center. Since 2013, you can see the trend in the red line going down. The percentage that the tax revenue represents in terms of the city's overall general fund dropped to 62% in 2017, and in the 2018 budget, it represents just over half at 51%. You can also see 2016 reflective of another positive year, rebounding from 14 and 15. That was just shy of the 2011 total of 3.2 million. It was at 3.1 million. In 2017, the revenue, preliminary information on the revenue to date, just under 2.4 million, 2,374,000, exceeded the budget estimate of 1.9 million by roughly 23%, or 447,000. That's on top of a 2016 result that had the gambling tax revenue come in about 450,000 ahead of the budget estimate, so representing roughly $900,000 over those 2 years. The estimated total general fund surplus for the city was roughly 1.2 million. And the card room tax revenue represented about 900,000 of that 1.2 million. Okay. So I want to talk through a little bit of the impact that some recent changes have had on the card room industry, starting with the minimum wage increase. The card rooms are a labor-intensive business. From the Washington State Gambling Commission, they're required to have a number of staff in the house whenever they have gambling activity going on, including the dealers, supervisors, general manager. They have surveillance. They also have runners. They have cage operators. So it's a very labor-intensive business, requiring approximately 300,000 hours of labor per year. Both of the card rooms employ, my understanding, over 100 full-time employees with an additional up to 50 or so part-time employees, so major employers in the community and very labor-intensive. You can see in the chart, this is the state minimum wage, and this the increases from 2016 through 2020 are a result of Initiative 1433, which was passed in November 2016 at the state level, passed at over 60% approval. You can see 2016 the rate was $9.47, went to $11 in 2017, increased again to $11.50 in 2018, and then on its way to $13.50 in 2020. Between 2017 and 2018, it's over a 20% increase in the minimum wage. This has an impact on the card rooms in two ways. One, their direct labor that they hire that they pay the minimum wage to, but also when the minimum wage goes up, they have to increase the wages of the other workers that they've hired recently that weren't making that wage, and to keep essentially the differences between a person with, say, 2 years experience and a new hire, they'd have to increase the wages across their wage scale as well. If you would estimate that approximately half of the hours would be impacted by the increase in the minimum wage and the 300,000 hours a year of annual labor, the cost would be roughly $328,000 if you include the impact of not just the minimum wage increase, but also the 7.65% Social Security and Medicare tax that's paid on top of that. In addition, the same initiative had a paid sick leave requirement. So all employers are now required to provide 1 hour of paid time off for every 40 hours worked. Again, if you use the same 50% of the 300,000 hour estimate, my estimate of the cost impact of this would be roughly $46,000 a year per card room. Medical insurance benefits is another change that's happened recently, actually implemented or passed in 2014. There were different ways to avoid fully implementing that in 2015 and into 2016, but had to be fully implemented in 2017. This is the requirement that all employers with more than 50 employees that work 30 hours or more a week, employers have to provide affordable and minimum coverage medical insurance to those employees, or pay a fine of $2,000 to $3,000 per FTE to the federal government. My estimate of that is that it has an impact of about $150,000 annually per card room. If you were to look back and add up both the impact of the minimum wage, the impact of the paid sick leave, and the impact of medical insurance benefits, you get to roughly $500,000 a year of impact on their costs annually per card room. Another thing that we can highlight and data that we have is the monthly gross revenue for the card rooms. Let me orient you to this graph. The blue bar on the left-hand axis is 2017 monthly revenue, and you can see the months across the bottom. The lines represent prior years. The red line is 2016, the green line is 2015, and the purple line is 2014. And you can see in 2016 was the highest year of the four that are represented there overall. And then the first part of 2017 started out very well. The reason that we've been told is the impact of the advertising and the opening of the ALNA Casino brought people up to the La Center Junction that were interested in learning more about what was happening up there, and they made their way to the two card rooms. But you can see the opening of the casino in April of 2017, the reduction that happened in the revenues to the two card rooms. And if you take the May to December average for 2017, it is almost exactly the same as the May to December amount for 2014. So while 2016 and 2017, the first part of 2017, were good, since the opening of the casino, the revenues have dropped down to roughly their 2014 levels at the two card rooms. Okay. Just to highlight a couple of other factors that have impacted the card room operations, the clientele that have been coming to the card rooms since the ALNA has opened have included more advantage players, essentially more skilled players that impact the net win percentage. They've had to increase player promotions to retain their existing customers, and that's not only a function of the ALNA opening, but also the Woodland card room and the promotions that they've been running. Loss of revenue from multiple card rooms to support administration, so there's a fixed cost in terms of human resources, accounting, and other administrative expenses that are now relying on just one card room, where both of these operations had two card rooms to support that administrative cost in recent years. And then there's the cost of maintaining the closed card room properties, the property taxes, the insurance, the utilities, the maintenance, and those costs as well. And then finally, the Woodland card room marketing promotion competition. That card room has changed hands recently, and the new owners are putting forth a new investment in the marketing promotion as well. Just a final factor here, the card rooms really can't raise prices when costs increase. Their revenue is really dependent upon the number of customers that they bring into the house that are playing, and then their net win percentage. Although there is revenue associated with some of the restaurant operations, the bulk of their revenue comes from the gambling activity, which doesn't have a price to it. It's just a volume and a net win. Okay? So I want to walk through the proposed changes to the gambling tax and the ordinance and the agreement, which is on 11A. This provides you a chart of what the gambling tax rates are in the different cities. There are about 45 to 50 card rooms operating in Washington State. This set of cities represents about 40 of those, so the bulk of that, and probably 90% or 95% of the revenue. And you can see the rates range from 11% in 3 cities, 10% being the most predominant rate, which is your current rate. But there's roughly a third of the cities that have a rate below 10%, and a number of cities have recently taken action to reduce their tax rates. Spokane Valley recently reduced their tax rate from, let me get the exact numbers here, from 10% to 6%. The city of Spokane reduced their tax rate from 8% to 2%. Woodland had initially had their tax rate set at 5%. They're at 3% now. And Moses Lake is at 10% in 2017, but is on its way to a 5% rate in 2022. They're lowering their rate by 1% a year over 5 years. So a number of cities have essentially been responding to either opening of tribal casinos or other competitive factors and lowering the rates for their card rooms. And just for reference purposes, the state's B&O tax on card rooms is roughly 1.6%, so the state's rate is much lower than what the cities are able to charge. And the parameters for the city's gambling tax rate is up to 20%. 20% is the statutory tax. So specific revisions to Ordinance 525, there's 3 primary revisions. One is there's a reference to taxpayer agreements with card room owners. Essentially, the ordinance provides for those agreements, and that's the item that will be under your consideration in 11A if you move forward with the ordinance changes as they're presented. I'll touch on those in a minute. There's a lowering of the late fee, so 5.25070 lowers the late fee per the table to the right there. Essentially, the rates were 5, 10, 15, and 20. They're proposed to be 2.5, 5, and 10. The current rates represent between 0.5 and 0.75% per day. an annual percentage rate in the range of 200 to 300% in terms of interest, and higher than the late fees that you'd find on your property taxes, although in line with some of the late fees that you might find for sales taxes, other businesses that pay excise taxes on a high cash volume business. But in terms of representative of other cities and also other taxes, reduction in the late fee is being proposed. And then in addition to strengthen the collections process, we're adding a reference to the RCW that allows the taxes from gambling tax gambling establishments to be the cities to place a priority lien upon the personal and real property that's associated with that gambling activity in a collection aspect. So if you are familiar with how the property tax works, the county assessor and the county treasurer are able to essentially be in first position, have a priority lien on any real estate that's not paying their taxes, and they're able to foreclose on that position and take possession of the property and sell the property to pay the debt that's owed on the taxes. You would have essentially the similar position as for the gambling activity. Okay? In terms of the agreement that's provided for in the ordinance, there's a couple things I wanted to highlight. The first is to change the tax rate from a 10% flat rate to a sliding scale marginal rates that's applied to monthly revenue. Effectively, this is a similar concept to the income tax that you pay. Each layer of revenue is going to be charged a different tax rate. In this instance, you can see the table on the right. The monthly revenue up to $400,000 would be taxed at 5%. Revenue between $400,000 and $700,000, 7.5%. $700,000 to $1 million would be 10%. $1 million to $1.3 million, 12.5%. And over $1.3 million would be 15%. And then I provided the frequency from the last 8 months or so, where the actual revenues have lied in terms of that same kind of structure. So 2 times the revenue is between 400 and 700, 10 times between 700 and $1 million, and 2 times between $1 million and $1.3 million. In addition, there would be a 5% tax rate extended up through $800,000 in monthly revenue for the months of April, May, and June. This is in consideration for the impacts of the roundabout construction at 4th and the Pacific Highway that's going to impact the card rooms, as well as also reflective of the full implementation of the city's new utility taxes. And then lastly, any agreement that you enter into with one card room would have to be available to other card rooms. So if other card rooms were to come into the community, the same type of agreement would be made available to them. Also, what don't have on here is that the agreements would expire at the end of 2018. 12/31/2018, and would default, the tax rate would default back to what's in the ordinance, which would be a 10% tax rate after that point. In addition, the agreements call for an additional payment in the event the card rooms were to close. Closure before June 30th would require a $25,000 payment. Closure between July 1 and October 31 would require a $15,000 payment. And closure after November 1st would not require any payment. The card rooms are required to notify the city when they close within 1 hour of their permanent closure, or 2 days in advance of any temporary closure, and provide the city with information about the temporary nature of that closure and their expected reopening date. And the amount due would be treated as a tax with the same penalties and the same collection process as provided for in the ordinance. In addition, there's a sort of a status meeting requirement in the agreement where the city and the card rooms would get together approximately quarterly to review the status, both from the card room side as well as the city side of how the agreement is operating. I want to walk through some of the impact of the new tax structure. The average monthly gross revenue from May to December was $850,000 a month. If you assume that would continue for all of 2018, the effective tax rate using the tax structure would be 6.8%. That's sort of a way to compare this structure with the 10% rate that you would have. The additional reduction for April to June would be reduce that annual effective tax rate to about 6.5%. So it'd be a roughly 32 to 35% reduction in the tax. The approximate reduction in the tax payment is $27,500 per month per card room, total of an estimated $360,000 for the full year. And you can see how that relates back to the $500,000 I referenced earlier in terms of the estimated impact of the minimum wage increase, the new sick leave requirement, paid time off requirement, and the impact of the additional medical benefits that the federal government is requiring. And again, as I mentioned before, the tax rate would be 10% in the end of 2018 and 2019 unless a new agreement was put in place. In terms of the impact on the city's general fund, that I mentioned before, the 2016 and 2017 surplus totaled approximately $1.2 million. Of that, about $900,000 is due to a surplus in the gambling tax revenues over the budget. The 2018 adopted budget has a planned deficit of $390,000 with a revenue estimate of $1,572,000. The revised revenue estimate under this proposal would be $1,329,000, an increase to the deficit of about $243,000, increasing the deficit to $633,000. Currently, your reserve funds, and these are just your general and reserve fund reserves, this doesn't include your capital fund reserves and your other reserves that you have, total about $6.8 million. Your policy target is 1.25 times your annual general fund expenses, which would be a $4.6 million total, so you're roughly $2.2 million over the policy target. And if this full deficit of $633,000 were to materialize, the ending general fund and reserve fund reserves would be $6.2 million, and that'd be roughly 1.7 times your annual expenses, so still well in excess of the 1.25 times for your policy target. And the use of the reserves proposed are not anticipated to cause a reduction in the services in 2018. In other words, the reserves would be used to cover any financial impact that the agreement would have. So the recommendation and the action is to, subject to the public hearing, approve the ordinance 2018-02, and then also on your agenda, if you approve that ordinance, is an alternative taxpayer agreement as item 11A on the City Council agenda. Just to refresh, the ordinance itself has three primary changes. It provides for an agreement with the taxpayers, the taxpayer agreements. It reduces the late fee charged on late payments, and then it also provides you the opportunity to place a priority lien on any unpaid gambling taxes, a lien on any gambling property, personal and real property used in the gambling activity. Any questions?
Paul, you mentioned, or your graph shows the gambling tax rate in Woodland is 3%. Has that changed recently? How long has that been 3%?
It went 3% in 2017.
And what was it before that?
It was as high as 5 when it started.
As high as 5?
And I know they reduced it, and then I think they actually went back, and now it's down to 3.
Comment to you, how many hours have you put into this? Because it looks very, very thorough. You know, I know that I've been meeting with the card clubs with the mayor and council members serving here, Cerveny for the past 3 years that I've been a council person. And I know they had a bumper year in 16, and a lot of that was due to a kind of a faulty opening by the A. They had a little bump there, and then now, if I can say this properly, it looks like you invested a lot of hours in actually talking with these folks to get these numbers, and they're real numbers, because that's what you do, right?
Yeah, so the numbers that I put together are my estimates. They're informed estimates based on conversations, but they're not revenue estimates that came from the card room, so I want to make that clear. And a lot of this information is information that came from the city in terms of the revenue side. The impact of the minimum wage increase is more just math, so I made some assumptions about 50% of the hours. The 300,000 hours was a rough estimate that I was able to get by looking at the cardroom, or using information on the cardroom employment levels. So that came from them. But in terms of time, it hasn't been significant. There's been probably 4 conversations that we've had over the last 2 months, meetings and additional conversations.
So on a percentile, you're saying your estimates of figures in here are, 95 percentiles, or?
No, I wouldn't. In terms of the estimated impact, again, what we used was $850,000 a month, which is the last 8 months average. I think looking backwards, using the actuals that they've had since the ALNA opened, is your best estimate about what the revenues would be going forward. So that's where that estimate came from. But I wouldn't put a percentage on that. I'm just telling you that it represents the best data that we have over the last 8 months. I would add, though, that one of the reasons, and I touched on this earlier, but we don't have perfect information, and so we don't know. We can't predict the future. So we don't know exactly what the impact of both the minimum wage increase or the ALNA opening is on their businesses. We do know, I think, from looking at the impact of the minimum wage going up, 20%, that has had a significant impact. The additional requirement for medical insurance has had a significant impact. And then the revenues are back to where they were in 2014. So with higher costs and lower revenue, that means their margins have gotten smaller. What we don't know is how that relates to their minimum levels of requirements in terms of cash flow. One of the things we didn't touch on is both cardrooms have made late tax payments. I'm not sure if that's, what to take from that, but that is the first time that that's happened in a number of years. The other impact, I think, that's not reflected here is that these cardrooms, through their employment and through the customers that come to the community, have a multiplier effect in the community. So through those 200 and 300 employees, those employees come to town, they buy gas, they eat here, they buy things at the stores. The cardrooms operate restaurants that generate sales tax. The patrons go to other businesses, and so they're really an economic, just looking at their general fund impact, 75-80% of your tax revenue represented there. That's a piece of it, but from a community-wide standpoint, they're your major employer. They're a clean industry in terms of the types of activity that they bring, tourist kinds of activity, bring people from outside the community in to generate tax revenue. Like I said, we don't have perfect knowledge about where the right tax rate is. We think by a sliding scale, we've structured something that if things are not so good for them, then they don't have to pay so much, but if things are good, they pay more. And we think that's an appropriate way to look at how to become more responsive to their economic environment, and again, be reflective of the impact that they have both in their employment and the patrons that they bring to the community.
Paul, I've got a question. Regarding Moses Lake, I find it interesting that they're cutting I heard you say they're cutting their tax from 10% to 5%, and it's phased over 5 years. So apparently they feel a need to reduce the tax, but yet it's protracted. Do you have any information on what kind of thinking they put into that?
I don't. I know there's one card room, and the card room owner made a pitch to their city council, and that was the agreement that they put in place. I also noticed in some of my research that there are some cities that did something on a temporary basis, and then bought back. What we don't know is, what happens after 1 year, 2 years. I think that's the plan, but that was the only one that did it over a protracted period. The others were date certain.
Of course. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lewis before I open up to the public hearing?
Any questions of me?
Any questions of you?
Yes, the city attorney drafted the ordinance change as well as the agreement that will cover if you approve the ordinance in 11A.
I did make a phone call to the attorney today to try to get clarifications, making sure that the language is correct. that what we're trying to do is falls within our governance parameters. So I did have a good conversation with him earlier, so I feel comfortable with the document the way it's been formulated.
Okay.
Paul, do we have any input from the card rooms on this proposal?
Other than, we've reviewed the draft with them, and they have no changes on the final draft that's in front of you today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, this is a public hearing, so at 8:14, I will open it up for public comment. If you would like to address the council, please step up to the podium and give us your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Harris. I live at 637 East Pioneer Loop. I was just wondering, what would happen if these card rooms go out of business? What happens to the city, to our taxes then? Is there something in force that the taxes get raised to individual homeowners? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Because I just hear what happens. People are upset about lowering the tax rate to these card rooms, but if they go out of business, what do we do then? So that's my only question.
Okay. Well, appreciate the question, and for public comment, we will take the comment and make notes, and we will get back to you on that, Mr. Harris. Okay, but thank you for your comment.
Mayor, council member, my name is Chris Wendell. I'm the general manager of the Lounge Frontier Casinos, formerly the New Phoenix. And I don't have much to say other than thank you for consideration of our business. I've been an employee there for 19 years. I've lived in the center. My kids go to school here. And I know it's important that we work together on considerations to keep us alive. I care and look for our business and for our employees and in this town. And again, from behalf of everybody, I hope we come together and work together, that we all stay strong and able to come together and work something out with this. So again, thank you for the consideration, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Come on.
Go ahead, please.
Al, come on.
Al Filla, 152 West 15th Street. Not a big supporter of the card rooms, but I am a big supporter of getting the tax revenues from them. And if they leave this town, just like the gentleman said, the center's going to be in a world of hurt. So, do your due diligence, get the facts, and, come up with a plan to keep these card rooms going. I'm not saying, just do your due diligence and come up with a decision to keep these card rooms in town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack Davis, 1524 West Alder Place, La Center. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the proposal. The card rooms have been great neighbors for many years. Until recently, they have been providing more than 70% of the revenue of La Center. In addition, they have always responded to various fundraising events and have participated in parades, La Center Art Days, so on. We took their money for granted during all the good times, but with the opening of the Tribal Casino, those good times are over. Their revenues are down considerably. The 10% tax that they have been paying to La Center came off the top of their gross income. Out of the remaining 90%, they paid other taxes, substantial salaries. They paid for equipment, supplies, electricity, sewer, gas, insurance. What was left was profit. Now that revenues are down, of course, our 10% is also down, as is the remaining 90%. If after paying all their other expenses, which have not gone down, and in some cases, as we saw tonight, have increased, then there is nothing left for profit. They are in an unsustainable situation. If there's no profit, any business person will and must make the decision to shut down the business. It is now our turn to work with the card rooms to help them remain in business. This proposal now links our taxes to their success. We share in the pain when revenues are down, but participate in the upside if business is, as we hope, increases. While the card rooms are in the gambling business, the city of La Center is not. We cannot and must not take a chance that the card rooms will shut down if we maintain a tax rate of 10%. I expect that most citizens of La Center will gladly take 5, 6, or 7% of something instead of 10% of nothing. This is eminently fair to all parties and gives the best chance for both card rooms to continue to operate. To insist on maintaining the rate at 10% flies in the face of reality. A yes vote is good for the card rooms and good for the people of La Center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, council members, citizens of La Center. My name is Michael Santoro. I live at 125 West 16th Street here in La Center. I'm kind of in a unique position. I've been in the casino management business for 35 years. I've worked in 4 states, including the city of La Center. I was a casino manager for 2 of the casinos. I spent 12 years in business watching the casinos, watching the card rooms flourish, watching them employ people, watching them do to La Center what they did to La Center, bring the revenue. My wife and I moved to La Center. We weren't in La Center when I began working at the casinos. We moved to La Center because we loved the community. Watch what he did. I retired 5 years ago, so I have no dog in a fight here at all. But the city has prospered. The growth of this city, I look at the beautiful parks, the pathways that we have. I look at the stadium. I look at our schools. I look at us fighting now with a big school bond issue, the growth that's coming. I look at Vegas Casino, the top of the hill. In reality, they do nothing to support what's going on in the city, except use our services, provide for more growth, impact on the schools, impact on our infrastructure. The card rooms are a necessity to the city. A sliding tax scale is a fair partnership. We've partnered with the casinos, the card rooms, for years. I don't think that there's many people here that moved to this city and didn't know what was here. We didn't move here because there's a Costco up at the junction. We didn't move here because was tons of growth. That's not why we came to the center. You look at our police force, one of the best police forces in the country, well-funded. But now you look at the revenues. You look at our struggles to balance the budget. I recommend we vote yes. It's a sliding scale. It's a partnership. It's what we should be doing. Partnering with the business, the best customer of the city. The best customer the city has. There's not a whole lot of ways for us to generate revenue. How do you generate revenue? When it's slow. You're going to have to raise taxes to balance the budget if these card rooms are closed. I recommend that the council adopt the proposal, start with a sliding tax scale, and we can look at it again at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council this evening? Seeing nobody stepping up to the podium, at this time I'll close the public hearing at 8:23. I'll turn it back over to the council for any other discussion, questions, comments. If not, could I get a motion?
Well, no, I'd like to make a comment.
Oh.
I think it's important, I've only been here like 10 or so years, but I did do some research, and the card rooms have been here for much longer than I've been here. Al, do you know when they came? You've been here a long time.
Sometime in the 80s.
In the 80s. Over that time, I've looked it up, and they've contributed over $40 million to us. Our Cadillac of a sewer plant is because of the revenues from the card rooms. Our Cadillac of the parks with a water feature is directly attributable to the excess revenues that we've been getting that other cities don't get. I've been in 5 cities now. For 30 years I worked in public government. There's never been a goose that laid a golden egg in any of those cities except here. And the card rooms, I can assure you, we would have loved to have that in Yakima or Gresham or Klamath Falls or any place else that I've been. Kelso, I mean, it's a gift that they're here. Now, I understand the history is that they didn't want them here. Nobody wanted them. But the individuals that ended up buying these casinos have, in fact, turned them around. And they aren't the pariah that the community thought they were going to be at all. They've been very, very good partners since I've been here. And I've had a lot of meetings with the card rooms in the last 3 years since I became one of your council people. So the Walmart has shown up. And you know what happens when the Walmart shows up. All the other small businesses suffer. And right now, our card clubs are in that particular situation. And we've been taxing them at a rate of 10%. That's above and beyond what all the other businesses in the community are being taxed at. We don't get that extra 10% above and beyond from anybody else, just the card rooms. And I understand it's a sin tax, but they've been good partners to us. We would not have the police department that we have today if we lose the $2 million a year. That we actually has been as much as $2 million and above. If we lose that money, how are we going to pay for our premier police department? We'll have to, we have to get in reality here, folks. And right now, the Walmart syndrome has happened, and I think we need to address this from the perspective of let's keep these guys as healthy as we can keep them, because they do. They employ a lot of people. Now, I know because I've met with them, have gone through a lot of cost-saving measures. They cleared out 2 of their casinos. They're still supporting us with their sewer, the sewer fees, etc. And they hopefully we can get something else done with those vacant buildings. But they've already had to cut their everything by at least 50%, and all their expenses are going up. I know if I was in that kind of a dilemma in my business, I'd certainly consider looking for a new business. So I think it's contingent upon us, and it wouldn't be that, I think some of the bigger cities that are listed there, probably Seattle, the card rooms don't make a lot of difference. But for a small little community like ours, they're critical. They've been up to 3/4 of our budget per annum. So they're very critical to what we have developed here in our community. We're all here and benefiting from that. So I would just, I wanted to kind of give some history there on what an impact they have had to the community. And I'd like to keep them here.
I'd like to say, we moved here 13 years ago, because the center was such a nice little town, and the card rooms are part of that. This gentleman back here asked what would happen if they closed. I'm sorry, sir, I don't remember your name. Richard. We can't just go on the tax meter and turn up your property tax. There's a limit, statutory limit of what your property taxes can be. So we can't replace that revenue, which means then we have to cut services or start eating up our reserves really fast. Paul laid out what our reserves look like. We got enough to keep going. We've done a very conservative budget over the last couple of years, and we're really grinding the thing down, not letting it get out of control because we weren't sure what A&A would do to us. And we're starting to see that now. I have to say personally, when this all started, I didn't think that the card rooms were going to suffer as much as they have been, but they are. And I'd rather get, as Jack said, 6.5% of something is better than 10% of nothing. So we've looked at this hard. We've looked at it from all sides. It's a difficult decision, but these people have, the card rooms, when I say people, have been good partners for us in the community. Everybody in this room benefits from the card rooms, what they've done for us. It takes care of our police force. We have 24/7 police. That's something that everybody here has said is important to them. And this is what help pays for it. So understand, we got to keep them here. The sliding scale, I think, is the best thing. They benefit, we benefit. And we're all in it together as partners. And anyway, appreciate your confidence in us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, I'd like to thank you for your effort in your work. It's very apparent. I spent quite a bit of time going over your report, and it was obvious that a lot of effort went into that. I had to jot a few notes down when looking at that, and I think it's important to point out that if you go back and you look at the years 2010 through 2013, the card rooms were contributing to our general fund $3 million a year. But since 2013, we haven't seen that. 2016 was a bit of an anomaly. It was a good year. However, last year, 2017, we received $2.4 million from the card rooms, and that includes the 4 good months before the A casino opened up. If you take that out, then we're down to the $1.5 or $1.6 million that we're looking ahead for 2018. What happens if one of the 2 card rooms closes? Leaves us with $800,000. Or what if both of them close? I think we're not in a position to take that risk. I do like the idea that we have eliminated the 10% cap, and we've got brackets now that go up to 12.5% and 15% tax. So in a good month, we have that opportunity to bring in even more. I like the idea that the effective tax rate it ranges between an estimated 6.5% and 6.8%. It's not the 5% that was originally proposed. I was never in favor of the 5%. I like a range going from 6.5 to 6.8. Another point that I think it's in favor of this is that this will sunset. It will expire at the end of the year. It gives us a year to monitor the program to see how it works, and if we like it or if we don't like it, or if it needs to be tweaked, we can do that. But it's not cast in concrete, so we can roll back to 10% in 2019 if that happens. I think it's worth seriously considering. I want to say that there have been, I believe, 3 months now when there have been late payments. And in my 40-plus years in the private sector, I have learned that late payments are never a good indication of what's to come. They usually foretell problems, and I think we need to take a close look at that too. Okay. And I appreciate the comments from those of you that have stood up and told us how you feel tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comments this evening?
I see 2 needs, one long-term, one short-term. Long-term, we definitely need to reduce our dependence on card room revenue. Over time, we will just have to do that in order to be a healthy city. And number 2, short-term, we need to preserve the health of these card rooms while we do number 1. Because, like Jack said, 10% of nothing isn't going to take us very far. And I think readjusting this tax structure serves both needs.
Thank you.
One thing that Doug said, one other thing there, that Doug mentioned is the late payments that we've had come in. If you looked at that penalty scale, that is a really high percentage. I mean, we would all like to invest our money and get that kind of percentage rate. And consequently, these people don't want to pay this type of percentage, and they've had to. I don't think they're doing it for grants. So I think it is indicating a serious problem out there. And as Doug said, it's not a good indicator. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
About Liz. Is Liz still on the line?
Liz, do you have any comments?
Not that haven't already been said. I think everything's been covered very well.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no more questions or comments, the council would like to entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 2018-02, an ordinance amending sections 5.25.010, section 5.25.030, section 5.25.070, and section 5.25.130 of the La Center Municipal Code.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 2018-02, an ordinance amending Title V, Business License, Tax and Regulations, Gambling Tax for the City of La Center Municipal Code. This is an ordinance, so could I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Ball?
Aye.
Councilmember Stimmel?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
Councilmember Valenzuela?
Aye.
Councilmember Servini?
Aye.
With that, the motion carries. I wanted to thank the council for your efforts, and again, I'd like to thank everybody that's here this evening, and I do appreciate the people that did speak during the public comment period. The next thing we have on the agenda this evening is another public hearing ordinance 2018-03, repealing ordinance 1-15-10 and adopting revised La Center Municipal Code 2.05.010, setting city council regular meeting schedule. And Director Levis will present.
Mayor Thornton, council members, and citizens, as you recall, in the January 10th meeting, you folks discussed changing the time of the meeting from 7 o'clock to 6:30. So in front of you is an ordinance to do just that. One caveat, I guess, is the effective date. We are a referendum city, so the ordinances take effect 30 days after the date of publication. So we'll get it in the newspaper next week, but then 30 days, so that the meetings, the actual 6:30 meetings won't start until March 14th. Can I answer any questions?
Thank you. So, yeah, we talked about this at the last city council meeting a little bit. If there's any discussion or questions? Otherwise, again, could I?
Mr. Mayor, I make a recommendation to approve ordinance 2018-03, amending Title II of the Administrative and Personnel, Section Chapter 5, City Council, Section 2.05.010, regular meetings of the Center Municipal Code to change the time of the regular council meetings to 6:30 on the second and the fourth Wednesday of each month.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 2018-03. Again, this is an ordinance. If I could get a roll call, please.
Councilmember Ball?
Aye.
Councilmember Stimmel?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Councilmember Valenzuela?
Aye.
Councilmember Servini?
Yes.
Okay, thank you again, council. Motion carries. So, under new business, we have to still discuss the taxpayer agreements that Mr. Lewis referred to earlier. Again, financial consultant Paul Lewis will present.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, the item you approved earlier under ordinance 2018-02 provided for agreements with the individual taxpayers that operate the card rooms. The item 11A authorizes the mayor to enter into those agreements and provides for you a copy of those agreements. As we discussed earlier, the city attorney drafted those agreements for your consideration. The impact of those agreements is, as we discussed earlier with the presentation, provides for a sliding scale marginal tax rate the monthly gross revenues. You see the brackets there, 5% up to 400,000, 7.5, 400 to 7, 10%, 700 to a million, 12.5, $1 million to $1.3 million, and 15% over $1.3 million. In addition, provides for a reduced tax rate for the April to June period, extending the 5% marginal tax rate up to $800,000 per month. And that also requires an additional payment to the city if the card room were closed before November 1st of 2018, $25,000 before June 30th, $15,000 from July to October, and then nothing after November 1. And again, any of the payments here would be considered gambling tax payments, and any collection process or late fees would be handled under the ordinance that you passed earlier. The two provisions that we've added somewhat late, one is a notification provision where the card rooms are required to notify the city within 1 hour if they were to permanently close, and 2 days in advance of any temporary closure, and in that communication need to provide you with information about the length of the closure and their anticipated reopening date. And then in addition, we've provided for quarterly status meetings with the card rooms to just get together and review the status of the agreement and their operations and the tax payments. With that, the recommendation is to authorize the mayor to sign the alternative tax agreements with MT&M Gaming and the Palace Inc. And I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Paul, just for the benefit of the citizens and the council, could you explain why this action is necessary after the other action?
So and I may rely on the city attorney for this, but the ordinance change essentially provides an avenue for you to enter into agreements with individual taxpayers. And what we wanted to do is, since this is a temporary, it expires, I didn't mention that, it expires at the end of the year, wanted to frame those specific agreements around this 1 year period in a separate agreement, as opposed to changing the code and making them permanent. I think that has some advantages, and the city attorney may want to add to that as well.
The code that you have in place up till this evening is very prescriptive, and is kind of a product of some acrimonious number of years that you had with the original card room operator in the city, and so it didn't really provide any flexibility. So the kind of flexibility that Paul has recommended, you could amend the code and put those new terms in there. That was one possibility. What I recommended is amend the code to allow to have a presumptive tax rate of 10%, or the opportunity to enter into an alternate tax agreement. And so the terms that he described in his initial presentation, those are in an agreement. And the code amendment that you passed earlier allows acknowledgement of these alternate tax agreements. So the substantive terms are in this. Once this expires, if it's not renewed or extended, it defaults back to the presumptive 10% tax rate.
Thank you.
And the requirements, basically, you have to comply with state law in terms of the gambling tax requirements, but also you have to have equitable taxation among similarly situated payers. So that's what this allows, that if you enter into an alternate tax agreement with one card room, you have to offer that to all similarly situated taxpayers, and you do that.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Paul, I'd just like to thank you for all your efforts.
Also, this will have retroactive effect. Suzanne told you how the code amendments have a 30-day delay to allow for referendum. These tax agreements, though, will have retroactive effect once they're signed back to January 1.
Okay. Thank you.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign alternative tax agreements with MT&M Gaming and the Palace Incorporated.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to authorize the mayor to sign alternative tax agreements with MT&M Gaming and the Palace. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you again, council. So with that, the council will be going into executive session. It's for potential or pending litigation. We'll be in executive session for approximately 20 minutes. After that, we will come back to open meeting, and I believe there will be action.
Recommend action.
A recommended action after the executive session. But at this time, I will ask everybody to please leave the chamber. We just came out of executive session.
Hang on.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, well, she did it, it's fine.
So we're live? Okay. And if that's on the tape, that we are back in session from executive session at 9:14. Okay, very good. Any further discussion by the council for what we discussed in executive session?
Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that the council authorize Sarah Mack and I to appeal the Growth Board's order on compliance dated January 10th, 2018, appeal that on up and eventually get it consolidated with the pending appeal at the Court of Appeals.
Mayor, make a motion that we follow our city attorney's recommendation here.
Authorize the appeal for,
Yes, absolutely.
do I have a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved in second to authorize the appeal for the Growth Board's decision, authorize Dan Cairns and Sarah Mack to appeal the growth management decision. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. That's all we have on the agenda this evening. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Been moved and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, too glad you waited.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Good night, Liz.
Get well.
Get better. Meeting adjourned. Wow. Good job. Thank you. Hope it not all like this.
Well, it was true. That's psyched up for it.